assimilated, they were architects, they were doctors, they were scientists, and they wanted to remind how their ancestors in the shtetl had lived. This is why they created the museum. It was the time when Theodor Herzl, of course, formed his vision of Zionism, of a Jewish state. And here you see one of our dearest objects in the museum. It's Theodor Herzl's bicycle. Here you see Theodor Herzl with his bicycle and his friend Arthur Schnitzler, a renowned writer who was his bicycle teacher. At the same time, of course, in Austria, anti-Semitism went high. It, of course, also through because of World War I. This road, of course, led into the catastrophe of the Shoah. The museum was destroyed in 1938. All the objects were confiscated by the Nazis and were brought to the inventories of different Austrian museums. And then, of course, during the Shoah, there was no museum anymore. And after the war, the Jews of Vienna were not welcome. There was no invitation for them to return to their hometown, to their home city. The community more or less was formed from displaced persons. That was people who survived the concentration camps, who mainly came from the neighboring countries, from Hungary, from the Czech Republic, or from Poland, etc. The community started from scratch, totally new. You must bear in mind that before the war there were 200,000 Jews in Vienna. Every 10th Viennese was Jewish, and after the war there was, of course, only a very, very small group of people. Austria, for a very long time, did not acknowledge that it had responsibility during the war for all of the atrocities. So it was up until Waldheim was elected, Kurt Waldheim was elected as Austrian president. Kurt Waldheim had not talked the truth about his Nazi past, but this was the time when in Austria, for the first time, people talked about the responsibility during the World War II. And this was also the time when the Jewish Museum was refounded. It was in 1988, actually shortly after the election of Waldheim in 1986. The mayor of Vienna, you can see him here next to Teddy Kollek, had the idea of refounding a Jewish museum in Vienna. So when I took over, we started a big refurbishment, and here you see our chief rabbi, Eisenberg, putting the mezuzah on our museum. We have a second location since the year 2000. It's the Museum Judenplatz, which has a very, very interesting story. Judenplatz was the center of the Jewish life in the Middle Ages in Vienna. It was a prospering and very important community. And Simon Wiesenthal, a very important Austrian Jew, he urged for a Shoah memorial, and he said it should be on Judenplatz because this was the center of Jewish life in the Middle Ages. And there was a big synagogue which was torn down during a pogrom in the 15th century. And by miracle, I really have to say by miracle, when the ground was opened to build the Shoah memorial, the foundations of the medieval synagogue were found. And this is really like a miracle that happened there. So the excavations of the synagogue were there, and the city then decided to build, nevertheless, the monument, but to form a path underneath that you can visit the excavation of the synagogue. And here you can see the interior of our second location. And this is the bima, for example, of the medieval synagogue, which is really a wonderful and very, very spiritual place. We are nevertheless no Holocaust museum. Remembering is, of course, a very, very big issue in our museum. But what we want to stress is something that in no other location is taught to people: the contribution of the Jewish community to the development of Austria, to the development of Austria in every sense of the word, in medicine, in science, in infrastructure, in whatever, in culture, in whatever way you would look at it. And in the schools in Austria, it's only taught about the Holocaust, but not what the Jews of Austria developed over the centuries for Austria. And that's really, really important, not always to concentrate only on these terrible, terrible years, but also to show what was before and what is now. We are, of course, a space of safekeeping and memory, because we have all the remains of this huge community in Austria. We are mediating cultural history, and this is the only place in Austria where this is done. We are also visualizing vanished Jewish places. We have a program where you can see and visit the synagogues that were destroyed by the Nazis during the November pogrom. And here you can see our big installation where you can visit virtually all the synagogues of Vienna. And there were 25 big synagogues in Vienna. What we did 2 years ago in 2018, we managed to create a light symbol in front of all the destroyed synagogues. This was for the first time that there was an indication at all these places that there has been a synagogue before. And we're very, very proud of this project. It took a very long time that we could convince the city to do this, but we finally succeeded. Here we have our former president, Heinz Fischer, with Ban Ki-moon, who visited one of our light symbols. And the prototype of the light symbol is now in the Jewish Museum. Education is, of course, our utmost goal, to inform the young people of the history of the Jewish community in Vienna. Because, as I mentioned, in the school books, they would never learn what they learn in our museum. So we consider ourselves as a learning space outside of the school environment. We're cooperating with many schools. Of course, we also deal with witnesses, as you can see here. We do not need worksheets because we're starting a dialogue with all our groups that are visiting us. We're defining the topics they want to discuss individually, with every group individually. We're telling stories, of course, about the past and the present. Communication, most important for us, a dialogue with all our visitors from 3, we always say, for people from 3 years old up until 120. And we receive all of them individually. We let them make decisions, what they want to see, what they want to talk about. And of course, mostly they go to see objects that look familiar and that has something to do with their lives. We have a program that's called #Objects, where we ask our visitors to look out for objects that they find interesting or that they find disgusting or whatever. And lots of our school classes go to this Chanukia, the golden object. It's from Sarajevo, from Bosnia, because we have lots of school classes who have a Bosnian origin. And here you see an anti-Semitic object. It's out of our collection, parts of our collection, which is, we also have an anti-Semitic collection, which was donated by a prominent Austrian Jew to the museum. And what is fascinating for us is that the school kids would not realize that this is an anti-Semitic object. They also always say it looks like Harry Potter or something out of a fantasy movie. And this is wonderful to see that these old stereotypes do not work anymore. And this is something we really find optimistic. Of course, Holocaust education is very, very important to us, but nevertheless, we talk in another way, as you would think of. We, of course, let artifacts speak. And this is one of the objects I just wanted to point out, because this is the way we work. With this object, for example, we work every day with our visitors. It's the box of Lili Bial. Lili Bial was the sole child of a Jewish family. They lived in a workers' district of Vienna, a very, very average life. And this is so important for us to show people that this is not a very prominent, not at all a prominent family. It's an average Austrian family, and the disaster comes because, of course, the Nazis come, and the parents of Lili sent her to Great Britain on a children's transport. And the children only could take a suitcase with clothes with them, and the parents packed the box, but the box never found to Lili because the parents were killed in a concentration camp. And so the box finally came when the Jewish Museum was refounded. It came into the Jewish Museum, and my predecessor, you can see him here, went to Great Britain. Lili was only found in 2004. And my predecessor went with the box packed by Lily's parents to her to Great Britain. And this is the only thing I envy him for, because I would have loved to meet Lily, of course. And she was so overwhelmed because she didn't even know how her parents looked like, because she didn't have a photograph, she didn't have anything. And she said, please take this box back to the museum and work with your visitors with my box. So what we do is we start a dialogue with our visitors. What would you pack in the box? And as you see, we have a very, very diverse group of visitors every day, school classes, lots of people who came from the Middle East to this country. And so we asked them, what would you pack in a box if you have to leave, or you had to leave your country? So this is how we start the dialogue. And this is how especially refugees from the Middle East can now realize what it means to be a Jew in Austria, that it means a similar story as their story. The Jews of Austria had to leave their country, they had to leave everything behind, yeah? And so for the first time it makes click, because they come with an education, Jew equals Israel equals enemy, you know? And it's so important that they learn Austria is now their new home country, and it's something totally different. So we started this program in 5 years ago, actually, when the first flow of refugees from the Middle East came to Vienna. And we had prominent visitors. We had Prince Charles when he was in Vienna 3 years ago, and he had learned about our program, and he wanted to be a witness of this program. And this is a group of Afghani refugees where he was taking part in our program. Yeah, it was, of course, one of the more exciting days in my work. So our visitor numbers, just to give you a small impression that you can see how we developed during the last years. Unfortunately, now we have a big loss of visitors because we do not have school classes at the moment, and we do not have tourists at the moment. Yeah, some of our exhibition strategies, I already told you. I really want to show the history of the Jewish community and what the Jewish community contributed to this country. We had an exhibition about the Ringstraße, a very important street in Vienna, which was only made possible by Jewish money, by the Jewish contribution to Vienna. We had an exhibition about the Jews and communism, also a very well received exhibition. We had an exhibition about the salonière, about the salons in Vienna, very, very important place, of course, to encounter. We had an exhibition on the Kabbalah. Maybe we will show that in Miami. That would be lovely. It was really a very fascinating topic, of course. This is an important Austrian artist. We portrayed him last year at his 90th birthday. We had an exhibition on also a Polish photographer who spent his years as a student in Austria. We had an exhibition about the Austrian, we said that the Wiener Bürgermeister of Jerusalem, the Viennese mayor of Jerusalem, Teddy Kollek, of course. We had an exhibition also of an average Austrian family, Kurt Klagsbrunn. They had a coal company in Vienna, a coal store, a store where they for heating, they sold coal, and the son studied medicine, and they fled to Brazil, and he became the most prominent photographer in Brazil. We had an exhibition on drawings by Simon Wiesenthal, also a very fascinating exhibition. Helena Rubinstein, of course, who lived sometime in Vienna before she migrated to Australia. We had an exhibition on marriages of convenience in exile, also very well received. And Leonard Bernstein, we just talked about him, a New Yorker in Vienna, also very well received exhibition. This is an exhibition we did last year. We wanted to show it in New York in fall, so hopefully we can do that next year. It's about 3 cartoonists who were born in Austria, had to leave then Austria. One went to France and then to the United States, and 2 directly to the United States via children's transports, and also fascinating life stories. We got the archive of the family Ephrussi 2 years ago. It's the family of Edmund de Waal, who wrote the book The Air with Amber Eyes. And as a long-term loan, we got all the Netzke, and maybe some of you have read the book, The Hair with Amber Eyes, and we're very proud that we can show all the Netzke now at the moment in an exhibition, which will travel next year to the Jewish Museum in New York. And for the first time, the whole family, the whole Ephrussi family met in Vienna after 1938. It was really incredible. The oldest member was Edmund de Waal's father, Victor, 92, and the youngest member of this crowd was 8 months old. And most of these family members met for the first time, even for the first time, because they live in the United States, they live in Mexico, they live in Great Britain. So it was a very, very moving ceremony we had. So now finally we come up to Hedy Lamarr. This is our second location, Museum Judenplatz, which is located next to the Shoah Monument by Rachel Whitehead. And here we show our exhibition, The Bluetooth Day. Please follow me. Here we start with the first years of Hedy Lamarr, who was born in Vienna, into a Jewish family, into a very bourgeois Jewish family, until she broke out and started her career as a movie star and appeared naked as the first woman in a movie. Yeah, she was born in 1914 as Hedwig Maria Eva Maria Kiesler. Her parents, Emil and Gertrud, were a bourgeois family. Emil was in banking and Gertrud was a concert pianist. She lived a carefree childhood in Austria with a nanny. Her teenage years, of course, they went skiing. They went to the different lakes of Austria. And here you can see her life, her love to dogs. That will follow us throughout her life. She always had the most incredible dogs. She grew up in a beautiful district of Vienna, in Döbling. She started at a very young age. At 16 years old, she started as an actress. She left school. Her father was, of course, very disappointed that she did not finish school, but she went into acting, which, of course, at that time was not considered a very good job. She starred in many movies in small roles in Vienna. So more or less she got famous. And then the turning point in Hedy's life was Ecstasy, where she appeared naked as the first woman in the history of movie making. And that made her world famous instantly. She married a wealthy ammunition tycoon, Fritz Mandl. Fritz Mandl came out of a Jewish background, but nevertheless he was friends with Mussolini and then later on also with the Nazis. And you can see Hedy was not very happy in this marriage, as you can see on this photo on the right-hand side. Of course, she was trapped in a golden cage. Mandl bought her everything she wanted. It was, of course, a life in luxury, but she could not stand being trapped and being sort of in a prison, living with Mandl. Here you can see the company where he made the weapons. So she escaped. And she went first to Paris, and then she went on the Normandy to New York. And on the ship, she met Louis B. Mayer, and Louis B. Mayer gave her the name Lamarr. We think because it's also because they were on the ship, and it's Lamarr, and so this was how she got the name Hedy Lamarr. So, of course, they tried on her makeup, the newest photo, the newest hairstyle, etc. And Algiers was the first movie she appeared in Hollywood, a movie that made her famous instantly. And she was considered the most beautiful woman in the world. Max Reinhardt, the famous theater artist, gave her this expression already in Vienna. And Hedy Lamarr said, any girl can be glamorous. All she has to do is stand still and look stupid. And this is what she always said, that the man wanted from her, you know. They gave her also only roles where she could not put out her acting talents, and she was very frustrated about that. Mainly, she played women with migration background because she had a very strong accent, and she became a screen icon over the years. But she was not satisfied with the role, so she started her own production company. But unfortunately, that went bankrupt after a very, very short period of time. Here you can see, of course, some of her screenshots and photographs. See, she wore incredible costumes, especially from Samson and Delilah, one of her most famous movies, where Edith Head made the costumes. Hedy Lamarr was married after Fritz Mandl 5 times, so altogether she was married for 6 times. He is John Loder, with whom she had 2 children and an adoptive son. That's her 4th. So Hedy, of course, as a mother with her 2 children. Hedy's homes, of course, went on postcards, etc. People were very interested in her life, in her private life. You can see some glimpses of her life at home. And Hedy, during the war, she tried to help fighting against the Nazis, and there's lots of other actors. She, of course, was very, very engaged in helping selling war bonds, etc. So here you can see her in this period of time. In this time, she saved her mother's life. Her mother, Gertrude, came to the United States. Her father passed away in 1935 already. And some people say this is because he saw the movie Ecstasy, and he couldn't stand that his daughter was in such a movie. So he passed away at a rather young age. But Hedy managed to have her mother in the United States, and they had close contact until her mother passed away in 1977. Next to her life as an actor, as a mother and everything else, she was an amateur inventor. She was always thinking of practical household aids, but also of entire weapon systems. And with a friend, a composer named Georges Ante, she developed an idea for a remote control system for torpedoes. It was an early prototype that led actually to Bluetooth and Wi-Fi. Both inventors were opponents of the Nazis, and they gave their invention to the US Navy as a contribution to the American war effort. But the system at that time was too complex for immediate practical implementation, however. Yeah, Hedy was acclaimed then as an inventor. And Hedy always longed for Austria. She was feeling so much for Austria, and she always considered herself an Austrian. But she only came back once in 1955 for a rather brief visit. But nevertheless, in Hollywood, she always wore these traditional Austrian costumes, as you can see. She always said, "Once Viennese, always Viennese." Yeah, unfortunately, when Hedy turned older, she started with cosmetic operations, and then she was also charged with shoplifting, not only once but twice. Then there was her biography, which was not authorized. She also was very upset about that. And the cosmetic surgeries, of course, she demanded from the surgeons that they try out completely new operation techniques, which were not always, unfortunately, successful. So she withdrew more and more from society, and she lived in seclusion. And now, of course, she's very acclaimed. There's this movie, Bombshell, which was a success. Here you can see Austrian stamps with her photo. She now influenced lots of female artists all over the world. And she wanted from her children that they will scatter her ashes in the Vienna woods, because she loved to be in the Vienna woods when she was a child. But nevertheless, her remains were buried in the central cemetery of Vienna, Zentralfriedhof, and she got an honorary grave by the city of Vienna. Yeah, how did we prepare the exhibition? I first made contact with Hedi's son, Anthony Loader, who lives in Los Angeles, and I managed to visit him. And here you can see the room where all the memorabilia are stored from Hedi Lamar. And I was looking out for objects, and of course I didn't have means to transport most of the things. And I said to Anthony, how can I transport this hat, which is a typical Austrian hat? And he said, just put it on your head and fly with the head. So this is what I did. I flew with the head of Hedi Lamar back from Los Angeles to Vienna. He had a lot of memorabilia, starting from a matchbox until all these paper doll books. It was fascinating to work in his house. So we took the paper dolls somehow as a guideline through the exhibition, and it's a very nice thing because people photograph themselves, of course, as selfie points on this with the paper dolls, the cutout paper dolls of Hedi Lamar. Yeah, and you've seen the dog. Maybe this is one of the dogs. It's how do you say, in a Spieluhr? It works and it plays a song. Yeah, and it's also a very nice object, of course, for the exhibition. Yeah, that's more or less it. And I hope I gave you a little glimpse into our work and into this exhibition. And this is also one of my most favorite photographs of Hedi Lamar.
Thank you, Danielle. That's absolutely, looks like a gorgeous, gorgeous exhibit.
Thank you so much. I hope it was not too long. So, and yeah.
Is it still up?
Yes, it's still up. We managed, of course, to talk to Anthony Loader, who gave most of the objects come from his private collection, and this is how it was easy to extend the exhibition now until fall. Yeah.
So it'll be up until the fall. Okay.
Yes.
I do have a few questions coming in for you.
Fantastic.
The first one is, what is your feeling about the dislike of the book, Building Design, that I guess this Debbie Dallin has read about? She said, I've seen the spot in person and agreed. So.
Okay. I do not know the book. Maybe it's a new book on Hedi Lamar, or is it the book about ecstasy that was written on her behalf, and she was not very happy about that?
Ah, okay. Okay. Did she acknowledge her Jewishness at all? I mean, we saw the picture of the Christmas tree. So was that?
Yeah. I think it was not a big issue for her. But in Vienna, of course, with her parents, they attended the synagogue. They took care of the holidays. So it was a Jewish upbringing, although very assimilated. That's definitely the case. Yeah. But I think it was not the utmost of her thoughts. Yeah.
Jackie, the question regarding the book is, it's not a book, it's a Jewish monument that looks like books.
Okay.
Oh, that's the Shoah monument in Vienna. Yeah,
yes, that's what the question is about.
Yeah, okay. This is actually the monument in front of our museum, and this is exactly the spot where I told you about the center of the Jewish life in the Middle Ages. Sure. And I think, I mean, it's a very, very abstract construction. Yeah. But it's very moving, because the thought is that the Jews are the people of the book, that the artist Rachel Whitered portrayed all the books the same, and the books are turned around, and all the books look identical. And I think the idea is that the Nazis tried to take away the identity of the people and made them all the same. You know, they made them all to numbers. Yeah, and I think it's very, very moving if you think of all these thoughts. And on the bottom of the monument engraved are all the names of the concentration camps. And I think it has a very, very strong impact. I mean, it's abstract, but nevertheless, it has an incredible power, especially if you know what is underneath the monument. Underneath the monument is the bima and the remains of the medieval synagogue. And if I'm down there, for me it's the most spiritual and moving place of Austria, because you have to think that even in the Middle Ages there also already was a pogrom many decades and many centuries before the Shoah happened, you know. So, and this is also something we have to bear in mind, that the Austrian Jewish history is not a continuous one. It's a history with many scatterings, many breaks, many ruptures, to put it in the right word. Sorry.
Wow, that's amazing. If you go back to that light project that you did around the synagogues, can you tell me about that? How did that get started? I mean, that's...
Actually, we did 4 years ago, we did an exhibition on the destroyed synagogues, where we showed who were the architects, where were they located, how did they look like. And actually at the press conference, someone asked, why is there not a symbol at all these synagogues? Why is there no sign? Why does the city doesn't do anything about that? And I said, if you support me, I already tried. If you support me, I really would like to do that. Yeah. And then with this lady who is a very strong personality, we went to the city councillor for cultural affairs, and it was very hard to convince him, because he said, I don't have money and the city doesn't have money, and we do not have the means to do something like that. And then in 2018, there was a commemoration year thinking of 1938. So there was a special budget from the city dedicated to memory projects, commemoration projects. And so we applied for money, and we got the money for this incredible important task, because of course it was very expensive to put up a light symbol on 25 different spots through 16 districts of Vienna. So all over the city, and especially in places where you would never think that there would ever have been a synagogue, because there's, of course, the community is so small today. You would not think that all over the city there were Jewish districts and Jewish communal buildings or synagogues, you know. And this is why it's so important, and especially also in districts where there's a lot of migration, a lot of people who came from another country to Vienna, and it's so important for them to see what was there.
Wow. Did the lights all come on at the same time?
Yes.
Wow.
All on November 9th, and the night of the November pogrom. And it was amazing. Yeah. And I'm really proud that we succeeded in that.
How long was it up for?
It's permanent.
Oh, wow.
Yes, it's permanent.
I want to see that all over the world.
Yeah, that would really be interesting. Yeah. Now we're trying to do it also outside of Vienna. And I just had a talk yesterday from someone from Lower Austria who is interested also to build it, because you don't see a sign, you know, they're modern buildings and there are no remains of these sites, you know.
Yeah, that's amazing. I have another question for you. Is, have the developers of electronic Bluetooth that we use now given her any recognition?
Actually, unfortunately, she already had passed away, and she did not have the patent. She did not have a patent on it, because she forgot to put that they gave their invention to the army, to the Navy. Yeah, but it was not patented, and that's a real problem, of course. Yeah. But we asked Bluetooth via a lawyer if we could use the name for the exhibition, because our exhibition is called Lady Bluetooth, and they agreed.
That's good. That's really interesting. How did they come up with that idea? I mean, what was the driving force behind that invention?
Because they wanted to fight torpedoes, and this is what obviously their invention was meant, that they could sort of remotely find a torpedo and destroy it before it hits a ship, something like that. So a remote, more or less remotely finding this that actually the torpedoes was in the background of their thoughts, how they could fight that.
Yeah. How many non-Jewish people do you think visit the museum and come to the programs? And
I think 95% are non-Jewish.
Really?
Of our Austrian visitors, yeah.
Wow.
And of our visitors from foreign countries, most of our visitors from foreign countries are Jewish. Yeah. Because, you know, the community, they come to different events, but they wouldn't come like regularly to exhibitions. They come, but it's not, you know, it's the community is also so small. If this community consists of not even 8,000 members. So, and we have 130,000 visitors. So, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
What happened?
No, we cannot hear
So
you.
I'm,
Okay.
Yeah, no, yeah, we couldn't hear you. Yeah.
Okay, good.
so there's another question, Danielle. What was her relationship with the Nazis?
Actually, she was a strong opponent, and she managed also to get her mother out of Vienna, which was very important to her. And she was only naturalized in the United States in 1953. So she was stateless, more or less, yeah.
Mm-hmm. I noticed that on her biography. It says she was stateless for this period of time. And another question was, do you still have the depot for Holocaust objects?
That was mine.
I didn't, sorry, could you repeat the question,
Do
please?
you still have, it says here depot, I'm not sure, Olga Weiss is asking this question. Do you have a collection for Holocaust objects? Do you have a depository? I'm not sure what word she was trying to use.
We have a visible depot.
Yes,
where
that's
we,
what she's
yeah,
asking.
where we
Depot.
show the remains of all the synagogues, what was saved. You know, it's just of course a minority of all these many objects of this huge community and of all these synagogues. But if you remember these objects like the Torah crown that was like not silver anymore but black in my presentation. This was found in the rubble after the November pogrom, and someone managed to hide it during the war. However that survived, we do not know, you know. But these are so important objects to us, you know. And this is, of course, what we have in our visible depot. Yeah, and we have lots of objects, of course, that tell stories, and that's so important to us, of average people. Because this is such an example how easy something like that can happen, you know, that it's average people who did not have the means to leave the country, you know, yeah, this is so important.
I have another question in off topic. Do you know if Gustav Klimt was Jewish?
I don't think so, yeah. Maybe there were some Jewish roots, but it's not, it's not that I know of, yeah.
Gustav Klimt.
And Gustav Klimt is he was an artist, for those of you who don't
Yeah.
know. What
But
was his...
lots of people who, of course, supported Klimt were Jews, you know. So his paintings, most of his models were Jewish, you know.
Like the Bloch-Bauer, Adele Bloch-Bauer.
Exactly, yeah.
What happened? What was the Austrian government's, you know, hold up with that picture? Why were they not willing to let that go? Portrait of...
Because it was, you know, it was considered to be an Austrian icon, you know. And this is like I mentioned, Austria for a very long time didn't consider itself as being a responsible country for what happened during the World War. It considered itself for a very long time as the first victim of the Nazis. Yeah, and that was very easy because that way you didn't have to deal with what happened. You know, so it was a silence in the families, and for the first time, people started to talk about what happened in the war after Waldheim was elected. Because there was such a rupture in the war. Waldheim was on TV, Kurt Waldheim, the Austrian president, and during his election campaign, it turned up that he had not talked the truth about his time during the Nazi period, you know. And of course, then he went on TV and he said, I only fulfilled my duties like all the other 100,000 of Austrian men. And people at home, the fathers and the grandfathers said, yeah, he's right, I also only fulfilled my duties. And the sons and the daughters said, how can you say that now? It's 1986, 1987, how can you still say something like that? You know, you have to confront the past. And that was for the first time that in Austria, dealing with the past started. And then, of course, it took some time until also dealing with all the objects, the arts, the buildings, you know, because for such a long time there was silence and there was no thought of to return things, yeah, or buildings or property was returned by a sum that was not at all the worth what you know, the real worth of this of all this amount people lost, you know.
Wow.
So it took a very, very long time. And now Austria has the best restitution law if you consider art. So this is really important what had happened, but very, very late, very late.
Right. All right, back to Hedy Lamarr. I have another question that just came in. Someone is asking about the origin of the Lamarr name. There is a different story. Somebody said Louis B. Mayer used the last name Barbara Lamarr as a silent screen star. Was there a...
It could also be, but it is obviously Louis B. Mayer who made Hedy Kiesler Mandel to Hedy Lamarr. It was more or less on the ship. They had met before in Paris, and Hedy had already asked if there was a contract possible, and Louis B. Mayer offered a very small amount of money. And then on the ship, he realized, I don't know, I think it was not by coincidence that they were on the ship at the same time. I think that Hedy was very clever, and she, of course, must have known that Louis B. Mayer was on the ship. And on the ship, Louis B. Mayer saw how she attracted men, and everybody was looking at her, staring at her. And then he thought maybe she's really a great actress or someone who will be made into an actress in Hollywood. And this is how he hired her at a much better amount for Hedy. So she got, of course, a better contract through this trip. But it is said that Louis B. Mayer considered the name Lamarr so he chose the name more or less. This is the saying.
Wow. It's truly amazing thinking about her first marriage.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
you said that guy was of Jewish descent also, the Nazi sympathizer?
Fritz Mandl. He was an incredible figure. Yeah? He made money with, of course, Italy with Mussolini and also some Nazis, and yeah, very, very well discussed gentleman. Yeah.
And what happened to him after the war?
Actually, he married several times, and then he supported some of the dictators in Latin America, and he settled somehow in Argentine, but he was buried in Austria then later on when he passed away near his ammunition company.
Wow. How did she get into inventing and collaborating in the military?
Actually, she was inventing constantly. This is what her son tells us, that she was all the time thinking of making people's life easier. Very often it was household things, or she had the idea for the soldiers during the war. She wanted to invent Coca-Cola in the form of how do you call it? A pill that if you put it into water, it would turn normal water into Coca-Cola. But somehow this invention tasted like toothpaste, so it was never patented. But these were the thoughts she had. She always wanted to make something that people would have an easier life, because she thought all these soldiers in the war or abroad, they would like to have a Coca-Cola, and they don't have Coca-Cola, but maybe they could just put a pill in the water and then it could turn into Coke. So she was constantly thinking of things like that. And of course, as she was being Jewish in Austria and she knew that her mother was really in danger, she was fighting against the Nazis. And so thinking of inventing it all the time, so of course that one led to the other.
Wow, okay. I see that Olga Weiss has her hand up. Olga, are you unmuted? Is there an Olga Weiss?
Yes, yes. I just wanted to know where the Lamar exhibit is coming in the United States after the virus is gone. Where
It
where
would
it's
be
going to
lovely.
travel.
So we were just talking before we opened, and we were just talking that it would be easy to transport it to the United States because most of it is documents and it's, I carried most of it in a suitcase to Vienna. So it would not be expensive to transport it to Miami, for example.
But do you have any plans for any American museums so far?
Actually, now we're dealing with where we are in conversation with a museum in the Czech Republic. They want to get the exhibit after we close it here, and hopefully we can show it in Miami. We were just talking about that before.
What
Right.
about
We're hoping to be able to get it once we reopen. So we'll keep you informed.
Would be wonderful.
How has the Jewish population of Vienna changed? Somebody wrote here in the 70s, most were from Hungary. There's been a migration from Israel in the century. So how has it changed?
The community, of course, started from scratch in 1945. The people who formed the community were displaced persons. They came from all around, from survivors from the concentration camps, like my parents-in-law. They were both from Poland, and they never wanted to return to Poland. So, of course, you also have to bear in mind that it was in 1945. Austria was the first country after the Iron Curtain. So, of course, people wanted to leave the Soviet zone and be in a neutral country like in Austria. But most of these displaced persons tried to go to Palestine. Israel was not founded by that time, or to the United States. So, but these people who stayed in Vienna formed the community more or less from scratch. And then, of course, we had, after the Hungarian Revolution, we had in 1956, we had a big influx of Hungarian Jews. And then when the Soviet Union opened its borders for Jews, and let the Jews leave to Israel, most of them had to travel via Vienna, and some of them stayed, and now they form 1/3 of the community. And we also have a very small community of Iranian Jews. Most of them went on to Los Angeles. There's a big congregation of Iranian Jews, but that's a very, very small amount in Austria. Yeah, but this is more or less how the community started. So the Soviet, of course, the Soviet Jews now, they are 1/3 of the community now in Vienna.
Oh. Do you remember the whole issue with a gallery owner who had a huge poster collection? I'm blanking on his name right now. And then there was a big legal argument. I think the sons wanted the collection. You remember what I'm talking about? It was taken, the Nazis took over the collection, or absconded with it.
There were 9,000 posters
Yeah, I remember his name.
cataloged, and the family lost them, and they tried to get them back. And there was a museum in Vienna that had all the posters, denied having the posters, and only at the death of the father, the survivor, did they return 9 of them. And so when you said that there was that Austria was very good about restitution at this point, that was a big case that was never fully resolved. Do you know anything about it?
Now I lost my screen. Just a second. Because I wanted to, it was so loud, I just wanted to check the volume. Just a second.
Okay, so somebody is suggesting that the story that you asked about,
Danielle,
Cheryl.
I don't think it's the Gerlich collection that she's talking about.
No.
These are posters.
But Gulit is not posted.
Posters.
Posters. It's not, I'm not familiar now at the moment with
Somebody has typed in that this story is based in Germany, not in Austria. But
Yeah.
why don't we,
Dr. Hans Sachs.
Yeah.
but why don't we, why
Okay.
don't we communicate by email about this story further?
Yeah, of course, with pleasure. I will look into that.
Just
Okay.
Thank you so much for the question. I will get into that.
So does anybody have any other questions? I mean, it's been really, really exciting. How are we doing on time? Are we almost out?
Yeah, we're at 1 hour, Jackie.
Okay.
We have 1 minute.
If anybody has a question, please type it in the chat real quick or raise a hand. Anybody? I see here 2 participants raise a hand. Let's see.
You still eat,
Couldn't hear you.
Couldn't hear you, Roger.
the famous Austrian cookies, Linzer torts?
Linzer Torte, yes, of course. Linzer Torte und Sachertorte.
Yeah.
And Jules Littman has, that'll be the last question. Go ahead.
Yes. Are we on?
Yes, please go ahead.
Fascinating it is that it wasn't the Viennese Jews who came back after the war. It was people claiming a right to the country who weren't born in that country. I just think that's a story of strength. And can you talk a bit about that?
Yeah, you mean the displaced persons?
The people who came back and gave new life to Vienna were not Viennese Jews.
The people who came back from the Viennese Jews, lots of them did decide not to come back because they had experienced the Nazis here and they did not want to come back. Some came back to try to get their property back, but most of them decided not to stay on in Vienna. Yeah. So the community more or less was formed by people who were not born in Austria, who were born in another country, because they could live in Austria because they did not experience the Nazis here. Like my parents, my husband's parents, they were both from Poland, but they never wanted to go to Poland, never. Because they said they had experienced the Nazis there and all the collaborators, of course, and
they felt they could have a fresh start in another country where the Nazis.
They could have a fresh start, but the Austrian, most of the Viennese Jews could not stay on here because of all they had experienced before.
Okay.
So it was a small part of people who came back.
How did the rest of Viennese society treat the Jews that came from other parts of Europe?
Well, they did not want the Jews back. The politician, and you could look at them
anyways.
So I'm sorry, I'm going to interrupt because we're out of time. Danielle, could you provide us with your email, and then perhaps you two could communicate further about this because we're out of time on the Zoom.
Thank you.
Okay, so why don't you type your email? Can you type it into the chat?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, and then
Danielle, wonderful.
Danielle, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. My middle name is Penny, and I share a birthday.
Listening, and I hope to see you.
Okay, thank you.
Will this be online?
Susan, this is Nancy with the Jewish Museum. We will take this hour and convert it, and it'll be on the Jewish Museum of Florida FIU YouTube site. So you can see it on YouTube if you type in JMOF_FIU. YouTube will have it up within the hour. So we welcome you to share that.
Okay, and if you take a quick look before we close this out, Danielle has put her email up on the chat. Danielle.spera, S-P-E-R-A, @jmw.at. So any of you who have further questions, Danielle, yes, please email her directly.
Danielle, auf Wiedersehen.
Auf Wiedersehen. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you.
Stay safe.
Okay, bye everyone.
Bye-bye. Thank you so much.
Bye.